Right then, Paul, we're back on again.
Hi, Vic.
How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm okay, yeah.
So obviously we got to say Happy New Year because I haven't seen you since then.
Right, okay, Happy New Year. Yeah.
So we
Did you
left.
have
Yeah, I had a good time. How about you?
Sorry?
How about you? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, it was okay. It was very quiet. I mean, that was intentional, really, in lots of ways. There was a bit of illness. There was quite a lot of illness. I was ill. I had COVID earlier in the year, and then everyone I know has been ill, not necessarily with COVID, just with various
it's just a lot of
illnesses.
stuff,
so it was like, okay, I'm just gonna roll with this and keep a low profile.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was fine. It was fine.
Exactly what you're supposed
to. Excellent.
So we left the last one on a cliffhanger. Because we've sort of skirted around, a lot of the sort of creative things about, as we're saying about we can't really explain. Well, logic falls short, I think, of explaining about what goes on with the mind.
Yeah.
But sort of navigating and creating some form of map is about as best we could do, I think. Okay. So we were going to go down the sort of the magic thing, and sort of come at this from, it'll probably be numerous perspectives, I guess. First of all, if you speak to somebody, magic is used as a term, isn't it? Quite flippantly. People talk about, that was magical, or it was like magic, or whatever, without really sort of, I don't say not understanding, but maybe it is not understanding what they're saying or what that term could mean, and how that would differ from somebody who is a magical practitioner. So right. I'd like to sort of unpack that a little bit, and we'll talk about that, and we can share a few ideas and sort of.
Okay.
So what's your take? Let's get the ball rolling.
Okay. Well, one of the advantages of how we've got to this point, Vic, is that it's been a long, meandering kind of experience. That's given me plenty of time to think about it.
Right.
Which is something I've been doing for a very long while, one way or another. But this has been quite intense, really, period of thinking and considering and chewing over and gestating things and interacting with them, more importantly. So, I really feel like a lot of the thoughts I've got are fresh, which is handy. And where to begin? Some of the things you brought up in the preamble there, I think might just come out in the wash. From my perspective about them, might just come out in the wash if we just pick a direction and head off in it, really, without worrying too much about the, laying out a map of where we're going, because I actually don't know.
Yeah, exactly, and I don't.
Exactly.
And that's the point. I think that is the whole point, isn't it?
But I did have spend a bit of time earlier today thinking about certain aspects of things, so they can be like a little island of some knowledge, some knowing that I've developed. It's personal knowing, by the way. So as a general caveat, certainly when it comes to this very personal stuff, I wouldn't dream of telling anyone else what to think or to state things which I think are potentially right in any certain way. Although I think it's very hard not to do that if that's how it is for you. You know, what is the taste of raspberries? It's like this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It might be a very poor description, but it is you're attempting to genuinely communicate something you think. So it might come across as being certain, but that's definitely not what I'll be doing. I'm not trying to tell other people what I definitively think anything is, because I think there's an important point there, which is there is no definitively, for reasons I think I probably started laying out in the last discussion. So I thought might be quite interesting to think about sigils,
yes,
as a thing, because that's kind of what we were months ago now talking about doing, is starting there. And I think frequently I've noticed that's where a lot of people start in terms of the discussion. And I do think it is really rather a convenient way of starting a discussion about it.
Okay, so first of all, we need to talk about what they are.
Yes.
And maybe for those who might watch this on YouTube, what they might look like. So do you want to start on that, and then I might create a sigil?
Great. That would be brilliant. Yeah. So so there are a number of ways of looking at sigils. Sigil is an old word. I'm not going to pretend I know all the roots of the word sigil, but they've been knocking around in the arcane for a very long time, and they had really something of a massive surge in interest around the chaos magic emergence some decades ago, and still hold a lot of sway. And I was thinking about this earlier today. How do I get into this, really? So the formulation that's most common in terms of defining, I think it's difficult to say what it is, but it might be easier to describe or discuss how they're meant to work.
Yes.
Because they could be almost anything, I think. So defining one is kind of a bit paradoxical. But we can talk about what they're meant to achieve, and I think that's probably going to be more instructive, really.
Yes.
So the traditional formulation has something to do with how you formulate the human mind. So the original formulation I'm familiar with is the one that arises from Spare's thinking.
Yeah.
And his thinking was, as I understand it, and it's fairly obvious, is quite tied to the idea, the Freudian notion of how the mind works.
Yeah.
Now, we just take a brief look at what that is. That's the general vibe of Freudian thinking, is that there's an unconscious, and it's generally not to be trusted. It has urges that are repressed. That's where your repressed urges go to hide out and pounce on you when you're least suspecting, in your dreams, when you let your guard down, when you're not acting in a proper way. It's your unconscious doing naughty things. So this is where your repressed ideas go. This is where, now, not everything about the Freudian position do I disagree with. That particular part of it, I think, needs updating. So I've started talking about Ian McGilchrist's ideas, and he doesn't think what we describe as the unconscious as being something somewhere, for example, where intuition might arise from. And I agree with him. I don't think it's a dark place of repression. I think it's a place of direct and implicit knowing. And I think I probably made that clear in the previous two talks. What I mean by that is direct, embodied, implicit knowing of the world around you. And it's not just the material world it knows. In fact, probably better, it knows the relations within the world it's operating in, because relations are primary. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. So what could, in this particular model of the way of looking at things, what could the sigil be? Well, like lots of things in our world that we produce by our hand or by our mouths, that we manifest, if you like, they are representations of something.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So, I mean, the spare sort of way of looking at it is that you have to smuggle them into your unconscious to activate them. Now, I've got to say, I'm not particularly comfortable with all of this because I don't really understand it. Like, I didn't really ever understand Freudian thinking. I looked at it, I've studied it a fair bit, but I've never found a resonance with it. So it's never really rung true. So I don't really remember all the parts. And so that's the way it is with things I don't really understand, is they don't stick with me. So that's where I am with that particular, it's very rough notion. I'm sure there'll be people screaming at the computers at the moment saying, well, that's completely wrong. And I apologize if that's the case. But it's never really stuck with me for those reasons. I find it very difficult to understand what you're meant to be doing. You get all these problems with intention and desire that you're not meant to have.
Do you think that's to do with the fact that we try to intellectualize that aspect of it instead of just sort of realizing that we can't fully know it?
Right.
So just even the idea that the intention is, that's that, and you just are able to accept it as it is without trying to understand the full functioning of what it, how much you need to put yourself into an altered state and all the rest of it, instead of just letting go of it.
Oh, wow. Vic,
you
absolutely.
See what I mean? It's like we want to quantify, and we want, so I think that might be, a lot of people get stuck with it, and I have.
I'm surprised.
You sort of think, have I intended
enough? I mean, this strikes at the heart of the matter, Vic. I think that's absolutely fantastic. That's exactly what I'm driving at. Thoughts along those lines, 100%. I was listening to Gordon White some while ago now, and he was talking about desire. And he said something along the lines of desire is a seed planted by the world, by nature, in you for it to grow.
Yes. Yes.
Now,
nothing happens without desire.
So that seed was planted. Sorry, beg your pardon, Vic.
I was going to say that nothing happens without desire. If you think of desire as being, a plant's either, the thing that a plant will do, a thing that creatures do, because that that means that there is an unfolding of life.
Right.
So if you link everything to a desire, well, that's the desire of a bee wanting to pollinate, wanting to drink from a flower, and accidentally, not by its own intention, but pollinating the plant.
Right.
And all the rest of it. You could loosely say all of that is desire.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Quite. I'm not going to find an argument here.
No, exactly. So, because again, the problem is, as soon as we sort of think about desire, we think about desire from the point of view of, it's us lusting after whatever it is, material things or people or whatever, right?
Right. So we support that with
there is an element of that, but it's sort of like it flatlines.
Yeah. We can swap words around and play semantics and call it intention, Vic. If that makes you feel better.
No, but I think it is desire.
Well, I don't disagree with you. So the thing is, Gordon plants that seed in my head, and then it flowers in my head, and then I come and talk to you, and whatever it is that I've made of that comes out.
Exactly.
So I think this, understanding is iterative. Right? Understanding is iterative and unfolding all the time. So this conversation would be impossible for me to write this down and then deliver what it is I think, because I'm not thinking what I was thinking when I was writing it, when I would have been writing it down 5 hours ago. Right. I need to extemporize it here. Otherwise it's gone. I'm repeating a dead thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yes. So the idea of a seed. Okay. So what is the seed that is represented? What is a seed as embodied by a sigil? I was thinking about how I might put this. So I spent a long while kind of thinking, and I did have a thought, a kind of visionary sort of moment. A definition might go something like this: a definition of how something like this might work, rather than what it is, right? So starting out with a very basic definition of what it is, without getting too caught up in it, you might look at a sigil as a shadow cast by a hyperdimensional object, otherwise known as an idea.
Yes.
A bit like a shadow of the object of a three-dimensional object that looks like a Necker cube on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Yes.
So we could digress and go on about how all things are representation. All representations are like that. But what I'm talking about here is something that comes from somewhere else. So I'm arguing an opposite direction of travel, I suppose, from the unconscious to the conscious. It's actually, that's where we need to smuggle it into.
Yeah. Yes.
Not from the conscious into the unconscious, but the other way.
Exactly.
That's my
I get that. I agree with you.
Gut feeling. Yeah. And so this is why I find all that other stuff a bit confusing. It's because it just doesn't chime with my experience. Now, it might be that other people, and I can't speak for other people absolutely chime with that way of looking at it. And I'm perfectly prepared to accept that might be precisely what is going on for them. So this is not an exclusive, but this is where I'm coming at it from. Certainly at this moment. I don't know, next week I might change my mind. I don't know. That would be proper chaos magic, wouldn't it?
Yes,
but I'm kind of, this is where it feels like the flow is going, is that you're creating a representation that is a shadow. So you're unconscious, knowing your aesthetic and knowing what it knows. And this is the knowing silent part of yourself, the one that doesn't really speak, is encouraging your concrete self, as it were, your explicit self, your embodied self, to construct a representation in this dimension that represents the desire that has been divined in this other silent dimension. Right.
So
that's as good as I can get. How that might work is something we can talk about.
So let's, because I said I would try and describe what a sigil is for people who don't know what a sigil is.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, brilliant.
So what I did was I wrote a little sort of desire thing, which is, the podcast is fun. So what I've done is I've taken out all the vowels, which of course, if you look at a load of consonants in a sentence, you would recognize what the words were without the vowels. Right? So it's almost sort of making Hebrew written language, because obviously they don't go with vowels, right? So we end up with a little, just sort of of course that could become a word in itself. That could become something like that. But then, of course, what I've done is I've made a picture of the letters.
Yeah.
And then over the flip side, which is my way of doing this, I've made it look a little bit more like it's a living thing. Or a flower or something like that, right? So that tends to be the way one of the systems that I use. So what we've actually got is some sort of little glyph, could be a cartoon sort of character made up of the shapes of the letters. Now, obviously, by doing that, you've concentrated on the message, but sort of not logically. So this is the thing, isn't it? It's like you're taking yourself away, and of course the trick is to forget what it represents. So in other words, you've completely taken the intellectual aspect of it away from the representation. And then you would do something to launch that. In other words, you would, whatever, you're going to do, dance naked around the front room or something, whatever. So that's so for people who don't know what sigils are. So it's like a little glyph create out of the message. Okay, so that's obviously something that's been going on for a very long time, because people were doing that with seals and all the rest of it. It's exactly the same thing, isn't it? Okay, so why should they work? So if we take them that they are a seed, which I would say that's where I've arrived with them, also from the point of view of any creative process that you spent time doing. So in my case, it would be songwriting, maybe. It's a very similar state of being immersed in the inner aspect of a piece of music. So what I mean by that, and of course I was talking to you before we started about the email that I got from the guy from Patreon called Tim, who pointed me in the direction of a professor called Angus Fletcher. And we were talking about the fact that it's very similar sort of trajectory, that he starts off in neuroscience and then moves across to studying arts in order to understand what's actually going on with the mind. And the reason that Tim sent this email was something that we spoke about when I was saying about people learning to play the guitar when they worked it out off the record. And of course, the interesting thing with it is that when you're working things out, you go into a very deep internal state to hear what it is inside your head, because it's the only way you can really break it down. And it's almost that process of it being inside your head, in this sort of internal studio, makes that become something else. So in other words, in your terminology, a seed for something. Because what we were saying last time was that seems to be the way that the creative, the skill and the style of a particular, in this case, musician, comes from the thing that they have to make decisions because things are maybe slightly wrong. So intellectually and logically, they get it wrong, but the internal seeking of that creates the new thing, which is a very different side of our thinking. And I think this sort of sigil thing is closer to that.
Right.
That's So I would say that this has got something that you could sort of label as magic in it because of that creative thing. So we've got to get, because obviously every time we talk about magic, you've got to forget this sort of thing, that things happen instantaneously. Because that's the idea that people have, the wave wand, and you get the Harry Potter thing, right?
Yeah.
And things happen, but they don't happen, and they certainly don't happen in real time anyway, do they? Let's face it. Which is, things will happen as if you're in the middle of it, but they won't happen as if it's a direct result of the thing that you've done, which is the logical thing.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's our causal model of the universe. There's a forward direction of time, and causes precede effects.
Yes, and that's not what seems to happen.
Right. So another way of looking at this, and I'm going to say this roughly because I have no choice but to say it roughly because I'm saying it. I'm using a representation. But my representation of that in words is something like well, it's already happened.
Yeah. Yes.
And that sounds nuts, right? I'm aware of this. That sounds too paradoxical to process. But that is, if you like, how you're instructed to process or to interact with these items, these representations, is that they are things which have already happened. Now, one might wonder, and I think it's quite educative for people to wonder what might that mean about them. And I do think it takes you to this idea of what people think of as the unconscious or the silent implicit self operating in a world in which causal relations are not as they are in the material world, in the world of the explicit. Time, causal relations, the arrow of time, all of this stuff is different. There are two contiguous oppositional worlds. One of habit which defines things, or which enacts and manifests things which are more likely. Probabilistic universe. That's the explicit universe that we typically inhabit. And then a more confusing, from an articulation point of view, world in which that isn't quite the way it is. Things are a bit more, causal relations are different. They may work in all sorts of directions. And in fact, it may not even be logical to describe them as causal in this way.
No. I think this is the thing.
Of a set of relations.
Yeah. I think this is the thing, that each time we go to explain something, you've got to be really careful about how easy it is to go and drop into, let's try to work that thing out. It's almost like you have to present the possibility of something and then not try to validate it. Only because it seems that is the world of that part of consciousness that doesn't, it needs to be left unanswered. You need to ask the questions, but leave it sort of slightly unanswered, because as soon as you answer something, you present the other side of the brain. And so there are lots of very weird things that start to happen, aren't there? Where once you trigger an event, lots of very strange things are set off. So I mentioned this in this book that I've just written about creativity, and I called it the ripple effect. And this idea that if you drop a brick into a pool, it will set off a series of ripples that then will go to places that the rock never went to. And although the rock will create the ripples, so a bigger rock will create bigger ripples, but the ripples are not the same image as the rock. So there's a lot of this sort of stuff where things are set off in such a way, and you can tell that they're being created by that thing, but they are not that thing, and they don't look like that thing. But by the sheer fact that they're happening, you can tell that they've been caused by that thing.
Right. Okay.
So we might look at like a lot of those things as, synchronicitous type events.
Right. Okay. So you're expressing this parallel, or exactly as I'm thinking about it, I detect. So I'm saying that you've created a representation, I'm using the representation when I say what I'm saying. And representations are that. They aren't that which you're representing. They are a representation of that which you're presenting. Does that make sense? So it's needless to say, it goes without saying, it is heuristic, it's approximate.
Yes.
So we're struggling is that which we struggle to articulate. So the way I put this, and I don't disagree with what you just said, I think it's the same thing articulated roughly, in a slightly different way, which is it's like a shadow cast by a hyperdimensional object, otherwise known as an idea.
Yeah.
It could be a desire. Could use replace the word idea with the word desire. We divine that desire from our internal aesthetics, which we know. I'm saying there are things we know which we cannot articulate. So we need to represent. So in order to interact with them or to cultivate them, we need to represent them in the explicit world. That's the lesson that's coming to me from doing it. And it's the lesson that comes to me from doing music. It's not, as you said earlier, we are creating a representation, right? That there is an art to creating a representation such that it is a seed rather than something that is a slavish, an attempt at a perfect articulation of something so perfect, a map so detailed that it is in fact a territory. Which is,
and that could be very confusing, of course, if you think about it.
Right. But also, I think this is what, for example, science tries to do. It forgets that the map isn't the territory because it actually is in the business of creating a map so detailed that it is the territory. Do you see what I mean? I love science. Yes, I said this last time. I'm a big fan of science, but I think this is where, when it goes wrong, this is where it goes wrong. It's something Ian McGilchrist has said many times, and I'm really just repeating what he said. But I think that is an incredible insight that he's come up with. Is that but I think that is, this gives us a window into what might be going wrong there, and I think that's it really. We're confusing the map for the territory because we're intending a map so detailed it is the territory. So we can say what is not in the map and therefore what is not in the territory.
Yes.
We can say that this does not exist because it's not on the map. And I think that's where science and other domains of human activity go wrong. It's where the materialist way of thinking goes wrong.
Yes.
But
I totally agree.
Heuristic representations of aesthetically derived desires that derive from aesthetics that we know so well about ourselves, that have always been there, are like a shadow cast from a higher dimension. So higher dimensional. So I'm taking to this idea that I don't want to go over it too much, but this idea that a three-dimensional being looking at a two-dimensional plane can see what the two-dimensional creature on the plane cannot see concerning the objects in that two-dimensional world. That might be a bit...
No, that makes sense. Yes. So right. So
if there's a square in that world, the two-dimensional being looking at the square would see a line. Whereas if you're in this other dimension looking down, you can see that it's a square. You can see inside the object.
Yes.
Right. This is just a metaphor. Right. Let's be clear about that. It's just a metaphor. But what if that is, and I am asking a what if question here, because I have to, because I'm using representations. But what if that is precisely the kind of thing that's happening? It's similar in kind.
Yes, I think that I would take that. First of all, going back to the thing about maps, and I do a lot of stuff with maps, as you know, from the point of view of teaching. And I often say to people, sometimes you want a map that is so simple that doesn't have all of the detail on, because if you put all the detail on, you would get lost. So my point here is, the classic Treasure Island map. You've got the squiggly outline of an island with a palm tree on it, and then there's 50 paces, and that's where the gold is.
Right. Yes.
If you replace that with a Google map, know which palm tree you're going for.
Yeah.
To use the simple map, you would have to know what the palm tree was. So there's certain things like you would have to know where the island was.
Mm.
So the point about that, and this is true with any map, you've got to understand how the the map works, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, if you had a very, very detailed map, it might not
Mm.
function because it's too complicated.
Right.
And I think this is what goes on,
Mm.
as you say, with the scientific map, is this
Mm.
belief that the map is all there is, and it becomes, as you say, the territory, and people
Right.
believe in the map.
Yes.
Of course,
Yes,
as soon
because
as you, yeah,
yeah.
as soon as you
Sorry.
step back from, yeah,
Well, the point of a map is that it's portable. In a paper map, ordnance survey map you're carrying around in your back pocket is portable and usable. It's a heuristic. It's a representation. It's a portable representation of something much more complex that allows you to navigate towards aims within that space. And I don't think there's any difference in kind between that and a sigil.
no, I
Right.
think that's a very good point.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is by reversing. Okay. So to summarize, I'm reversing this idea of the direction of travel of the sigil from the conscious to the unconscious. I'm saying it's from the other direction. You're engaging a creative process by which you direct your material self to create a representation, to bring out of your hidden intentions, which which you derive from your aesthetics, into the material world. Right. Now, here's the interesting thing, because people ask for cars and they ask for material stuff in the material world. Obviously, they do. It's kind of a side issue now. In this formulation, that's become a side issue because the very act of intending these aesthetics in the material world is transformational. It transforms the self because you're intending a relation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So at the hyperdimensional side of it, for want of a better way of putting it, I've got no other art word I can come up with. The hyperdimensional sense, that there's a hyperdimensional, unarticulatable desire that is your seed. You've crafted this seed that replants this such that it grows in the world. So just like a map, a seed is an incomplete thing. It is an initiator of. We can overstretch the metaphors a bit here, I think. But do you see where I'm coming from?
I do. I do.
Okay.
So you mentioned about time. So one of the things I found very fascinating about this is how time, if you think of this as you mentioned, sort of causal thing about time, and
Yes.
things that follow on, that sort of gets disrupted with processes like this, where things happen out of time.
Yeah.
Now, okay, people often reach for the quantum physics example, but of course there is an example of time not moving in the way that we think in quantum physics, and the fact that potentially the future draws the past and the present to itself. So that's the split, the electron
Absolutely.
split, aperture.
Absolutely, Vic.
Right.
Yeah.
So the point about this is there seems to be something about time where it does something like, this idea of the sphere, where if you traveled around the Earth for long enough, you'd end up coming back to the beginning again, even
Right.
though you appear to be
Yes.
walking in a straight line. And this might be something, as creation tends to repeat itself over and over again, that time might do something very similar to that it doesn't move in the way that we assume it does. It seems to be moving in a straight line, but it might be not doing that.
Right.
So there's a lot of obviously theories about this, but the point, even if we sort of go, well, maybe time moves sideways as well. Maybe it does that without having to know exactly why, because there are so many examples of intending to do something, and within the period of, the next day or the day after, you get something in the post that is absolutely related to that you've intended for, and it must have already been in the post.
Right.
So how does that, so that's the point. So I'm not saying that we want to explain that. It's just that this happens so frequently that it can't be right. If you sat down and spoke to most people that are involved in this sort of stuff, it would be the same thing, wouldn't it? I mean, everybody would go, oh yeah, that was weird. Because you can't explain. But of course, it also happens in art. That's the point. As soon as you're writing a song, and then something comes up that gives you the answer to the thing, of the song. How do you know to turn the radio on at a particular point and you hear something? It's like, hang on a minute, that is it. It gives you that thing. It's almost not to the point that it's just coincidental. That's the wrong word, but that you make something of something you hear, but it is so directed. It might be a song that you were trying to work out. I remember hearing that something in a song by so and so, and you can't find it, and then it will be on the radio, or somebody will give you a CD and it's got it on there.
Yes,
that type of thing. So there is something very strange about setting off, as you say, planting a seed about something, whether that's a sigil or something else, that either makes you more aware of what's already going on, but because you're not in that zone, you don't see it or hear it or feel it. As soon as you act on that thing, it starts to become clear. I don't know what that is, but there is certainly something in that.
Yes. Well, so it seems to me that we're looking at outcomes now, broadly speaking. And of course, this is sticky territory in some ways.
Very broadly speaking.
Very broadly. That's not a criticism. We are limited by our articulatable representations here. So we, gently putting this as a kind of broad brush approximation, we're getting into outcomes and assessing outcomes and thinking about causes. That's fine. I don't see any problem with that. We just have to bear in mind that where this is coming from may not operate in that way, which is quite liberating, really, if you think about it, because you might argue that you're doing it because it was already caused. You're engaging in that representation activity because it was inevitable to do that. It's already happened, So the things which it is impossible for us to articulate that stuff, and that is why I use the idea of a hyperdimensional object, otherwise known as an idea or a seed or a desire. Is that's being formulated in part of you that is not accessible to articulation.
Yes.
And that is the power of it.
Yes.
And so we've got to be cautious around that, not craven or cowardly, but cautious that we're not taking ourselves too seriously in terms of how we're representing them. Some genius somewhere once said, talking about music is like dancing around architecture.
Yes.
It's that kind of problem.
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying it needs to be done with a tongue firmly but embedded in your cheek.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's also, it's very similar to that thing about the comedian saying about jokes. trying to analyze a joke is like trying to dissect a frog. In both
Right.
instances, you end up with a dead frog. And you sort of go, well, yeah, and that's true with music. It's true with anything.
Yeah.
That's from that creative world, including
Yes.
magical thinking. In this instance, we're talking about sigils. But of course,
Right.
whatever we talk about regarding sigils, this is applicable to anything else that we could talk about magically, whether that's healing intentions or using, creating magical objects. Actually, let's go down this rabbit hole.
Okay.
I don't hear a lot of people talk about this. I would say that one of the most prolific magical objects is a children's toy. Because if you think about that as an object and how we've had those for probably as long as humans have existed, something that was given to a child, probably, I would say, as a form of protection, as well as something for them to play with. And toys have got this extraordinary power psychologically for children, to the point that I remember there was an interview with John Humphreys after one of these I think it was a mudslide or something in South America, where the president of the Save the Children Fund was on the radio, and John Humphreys said to him, what do you need? And this chap said, because he was talking about the fact there was all these children that were like street children and what have you, and people that had lost their parents and all the rest of it. He said, we need teddy bears.
Right.
And it completely wrong-footed John Humphreys, because he thought he'd misheard him. He said, no, we need toys, children's toys. He said, because it is the most, because we've got blankets and stuff like that, but it is the most powerful psychological tool that we can use with children. Because we can talk to them. They don't answer back. They don't criticize them, but they will listen. And, so I'm interested in things like this, where things that are sort of hidden in plain sight, like toys. That if you think back to your favorite toy, it wasn't just an inanimate object. It was something that had a presence in a room when you walked into it. And I think, again, that's the type of thing that sort of is hiding in plain sight with how we can have used objects. Because, I mean, what's the difference between a little figurine of ISIS, right? Or Ra, which is, tiny, which would, whoever going up and down the Osiris going up and down the Nile, right? With the attending priests. And it's not a representation of the god, it is the god, because the god is inside the object.
Okay.
Right? To a children's toy. A much child's toy. So something in this which I think I find really interesting, because I would, without going down too much of another rabbit hole, I would say that is also true of musical instruments. Certain musical instruments,
right?
A special instrument that you have,
right?
It's the one that you associate yourself with and you use, and it's the thing that talks to you,
right? Yeah. Okay.
So that's another doorway, which we
These are
could find.
beautiful ideas. These are beautiful ideas, Vic. The idea of teddy bears being a frontline intervention in a
Yes, yeah.
disaster for children is a
And,
beautiful
and, I,
notion.
and I always
Uh,
like it when it comes
find
from
hard
an
to
area
add
you
to
don't
that.
expect. Right?
Yeah, I find it hard to add to the beauty of that notion. Um, the thing that occurred to me whilst you were speaking was that children's toys, see, children are closer, in my formulation of the person, which is, as I've said before, derived very heavily from certain other sources, is the idea that children are closer to not using language representations than adults are. They're less dominated by them. If you go back far enough in your own personal history, you don't have any verbal representations available to you.
No.
And toys are like other objects in your world, really. I mean, when you're very, very young, they're almost indistinguishable. Thinking about my son when he was that age, I used to have a dehumidifier that had the air outlet on the side, and I'd give him a load of coins to play with because he was quite interested in coins. I had to watch him in case he swallowed any. But it was years later I discovered he'd posted hundreds. Well, he posted loads of coins
into the machine,
into the crates because these things were toys to him. Yeah. They weren't representations of anything. No. He had other toys which were more anthropomorphic, I suppose, in form. But there is, I think you're absolutely right. There's something very special and because they're relational things, they're not object definitions, if you like. They're not, at some point early enough in your personal history, they're not named. They're unnamed. They're nameless. They're simply relations. We start off only with relations and not with representations of things. Then this is, if you like, the slipping into the materialistic domain for a moment. That's our origin story. That's where we begin, and we get further away from that as we progress. Apparently, knowing more than we did then. But that takes me on to another part of the mystery that we're discussing broadly. And I really am out on a limb here, making up as I go along. It's so where am I going to get to this? So sorry, I've lost my thread, Vic. You might have to edit this bit.
Okay. Roughly where you're going.
Yeah. So what did I just say? So as we get older, we get further away from our origin story.
Yeah.
Towards a more crystallized version of the world, which is highly represented in language. And along the way, we lose something. And that, for me, marries up with the idea that when we perform a magical act, we're doing something that we're already doing.
Right.
We're already doing it. We're doing it explicitly. We're intending it now. We're intending to do it, but it's already something we do. They're already engaging in those processes. They're natural processes. They come to us naturally. One might argue from the origin story we were just considering, this is, I suppose, another rabbit hole, is that children are better at it than we are.
Yes.
Or that we were better at it when we were children than we are at it.
Yes.
That we are now. And we're relearning something we knew. We're relearning it as a relation between these two selves, which are now more fiercely demarked. They're more boundaried than they were when we were that. In fact, you might argue that one of them wasn't really there it was dormant. The left hemisphere explicit self was simply a potential early enough. Get much older, we have to start intending to use the processes we were using then. But by doing so, we can have more, I suppose, although the intentions and the aesthetics are there, we can be more nuanced, I suppose, in how we do it. We can, for example, so this is, I guess, another layer to this, the same thrust, which is that we can use the imaginal more intentionally. So, for example, just a good example I've run into that comes from somebody who's got a lot to say, who is Gordon White. He talks about in sigil magic the idea of a robofish.
Yes, yeah, the robofish. Yeah.
So the robofish idea, I mean, this is just a fantastic example of someone exploring the imaginal to come up with something really inspiring. I think this is a really inspiring idea. It's the idea of shoaling your sigils. So rather than just producing one and making really quite a big deal out of it, you make a few of them, right? And one of them is your robofish.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, he comes up with this idea from thinking about the life cycle of the stickleback.
Right.
And he was reading a science paper that said that I can't remember the details of the paper, it doesn't really matter, that scientists had created a robot stickleback and they were using it to learn about how sticklebacks behave. But he was quite entranced by this idea, and he came up with the idea of applying this to sigils. So your robofish is something, and if I could remember the study properly, if I remember what Gordon White had said about it, it would make it clearer. But basically, he mirrored the idea of a robofish in his production of sigils, and one of them was a sigil of something that was already going to happen.
Yes.
So I have coffee.
Yes, exactly. I drink tea. Or something. Yeah, yeah.
Or I eat curry, or I do this, or I do that.
Yeah.
And the job of that is to simply be something that has already or will inevitably happen. Something you know will happen, and you shoal that with a bunch of sigils which seem to be more indeterminate. You know, I get a really good job that pays me twice what I'm earning now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very brutish and rough example. I do apologize.
That's good, because the point
much more elegant, but it's very specific.
The reason why that makes sense is because something within that shoal of fish is making that shoal of fish move in a particular way. I think that's the concept of the robofish. So if you produce one that actually happens, then it makes it more likely that that the other ones will happen. In other words, they will follow the manifestation of the one that we know.
Right.
So there's another little trick here. This is sort of slightly Aidan Wachter, slightly. It's a bit of a where he's got this thing about the black book where you write a diary of things that you want to happen as if they're happening in the diary. So the spin on that is to actually write the diary, including things that happened with the things that haven't happened as a diary entry on a day. So, again, similar sort of thing, that the thing that hasn't happened yet is intermingling with the thing that is already happening. So that, that's another sort of, there's lots of techniques like this where you're mixing in your words, the seed of the thing that you're intending or something that's already there, or you know is going to happen. And so just because obviously we're going to need to wind up shortly.
Okay.
There's one other little bit of this which I think is important, and I think so. Going back to the thing about this sort of creative thing and this sort of deep internalization of the thing that you are creating, right? Because of your poem, whatever. Or, an artist's ability to look at a blank canvas and see the object, be able to project the image onto this blank canvas, which is something I know some people can do very well. That use of creative imagination is in lots and lots of techniques such as yoga, Tai Chi, sports psychology, and all the rest of it, about experiencing the state that you want using your imagination, whether that's imagining chi or whatever, and martial arts uses a lot of that sort of stuff. Now, again, this is something I think is sort of like hidden in plain sight. There is something there that seems to be consistent through time and culture. And I think that's one of the things that, again, because of the fact that we want everything to be so logical, that's almost like, I don't want to talk about that's a bit too sort of woo, but it's like, well, everyone seems to be doing that. So is that not something we should be paying attention to? So this is something that is consistently happening throughout time, throughout different cultures, and it seems to be central to lots of things that people would sort of go, well, there is probably something going on here, isn't there? But they don't quite know what it is, whether that's yoga, any sort of or martial arts and stuff like that, where you get people who do things that seem to be quite astonishing, but it's difficult to work out why.
Yes.
So,
right.
I just wanted to leave that sort of floating somehow. But I think that's an important bit, and that ties in again, sort of ties in with what we were talking about at the very beginning about sigils, where that process is that casting a shadow from, the dimension beyond what casting a shadow onto where we are, and using aspects of our consciousness, or seemingly it's our consciousness, but maybe it's coming from somewhere else. Who knows? Like ideas. It's like that song that pops into your head. Where did that come from?
Yeah. Cool. That's it. This, for me, it's an essentially optimistic mindset.
Yes.
So you have to be optimistic to write a song.
Yes, you do.
Right? You have to be optimistic. You have to be like, I can do it. No, this is possible. This is not just possible, it's inevitable.
Yes.
And I think the key thing here for me is that it's not just possible, it's not a thing, you see, it's a relation. You're establishing and maintaining a relation over time. You're encouraging your material self to be engaged with that as well.
Yeah.
So the way Gordon puts it is that you become the person for which those things happen.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's an optimistic growing thing, which also resonates with the idea of creating seeds. And what you can do, of course, and I've noticed that he does this as well, is this idea of kind of extending your model, of what you're doing with sigils and how you're managing them. So he'll keep them around for a while rather than destroying them necessarily. I think sometimes, disposing of them or forgetting about the sigil, there are alternative things you can be doing. You can be keeping them around and having them repeat themselves. You can carry on polishing your intentions because it's relational. There are no rules in that sense, you can allow your imagination to let loose on it. I do think it's useful, perhaps even, I think it's very useful to have some tradition you're drawing upon to guide yourself, because there is such an infinity of possibilities. A tradition is a very helpful place to begin. And I would argue that it almost doesn't matter whether it's yoga or Taoism, or chaos magic.
No,
it really doesn't matter.
Or even mystical Christianity, it doesn't really matter.
Right, absolutely. And so therefore choose amongst your make it aesthetic choices. You'll resonate, you'll know when you're encountering something that is meaningful to you. Take that seriously. You don't need to consult an authority. You have one, authority. I'll repeat this, you're already doing it.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
already something that's happening. It's just that you're kind of engaging with it. Like, for example, I might come up with a tune in my head, whistle a tune as I'm walking down the road. Am I writing a song? Well, I might be, right? But if I want to play that song again, I'm going to have to do something other than just... Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
totally. I want to polish that so that it becomes something. It becomes a complete representation of that feeling that I'm trying to articulate by writing a piece of music. But there's absolutely nothing invalid about whistling a song as you walk down whistling a random tune as you walk down the street. That is also a beautiful thing to be doing.
Yeah,
there's a question of what you intend, and this is, I think that's where I would go with all of this. That's what we mean by intention. It's the doing of things. And I think you started by saying that. I think, was it Tim?
Yes.
Who you mentioned at the beginning? Yeah. And I think Fletcher is the theorist. Totally unfamiliar.
It's let me just get that up so we get that right. So,
yeah. Hello, Tim, by the way.
He's quoting Angus Fletcher. So
Angus Fletcher.
So Angus Fletcher's got, let's just find some of his books. So these are worth checking out, actually. So Angus Fletcher, I think he's on a number of podcasts as well, being interviewed. So I haven't actually read anything by him yet because I've only just obviously been alerted to this guy's stuff. So there's a book called Wonderworks.
Okay.
So literary invention and the science of stories is the subtitle of that. And another one called Story Thinking. So he did a book about screenwriting as well.
Right.
Screenwriting 101.
Okay.
So he's got quite a few bits here.
Yeah,
there's about 4 or 5 books here.
Okay. Well, I just thought I'd try and tie what we were just saying now right back to the beginning, and sort of say, well, I'm very interested in seeing what those books are about, not those ideas, because there was something about what you said, how when you summarised it, that struck a chord with me. So I must make a note.
Yeah, cool, brilliant stuff. Right then, I think we're done.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
That was great. That was really good. Nice to sort of chat. And again, well, we're sort of formulating. Well, again, we're formulating maps, aren't we? One of the things I think actually as you get older, and you're saying about, and maybe there's a return to that way of thinking of children, but in a way that we're revisiting. It's like we're sort of squaring that circle, because in a way that is true, because as you get really quite old, you do sort of go back to a childlike state.
Right.
So there is something in that journey. And maybe it's part of it is because you realise that when you're young, you think you got all the answers, and as you get older, you realise you get less and less answers.
Well, you're asking for different answers. You become unsatisfied. becoming
Yeah, maybe.
unsatisfied with simple relations, and you want the cars and the money, and it becomes about that, and you get kind of caught up in the materialistic way of weighing everything against its dollar value, rather than paying attention to the relations. And I think this is an important, whether or not you are someone who thinks magic is a real thing or not, is understanding that really what it's trying to encourage you to do, in my view, is to become more responsive, to make the relations primary in your world, to listen to the birds singing, and to think of it as medicine.
Yes.
To speak and say things which are unexpurgated, even extemporaneous, and to see that as medicine. You know, that's not a pompous thing. It's not a causal thing. Those are ideas from the materialistic world. This is about making relations primary and being responsive to within those relations. And if you look at all the ritualistic side of magic, I think we haven't got time to talk about that, I know, but that is about creating relations and maintaining them, giving offerings, doing things in a particular way that gives respect and forges relations and maintains them. And I think this is an extremely healthy thing to be focusing on for all the reasons contained in our previous 2 discussions, Vic. So I just thought I'd stick that on.
That's a good point to raise that again, because again, that's one of the things I think, in essence, how we function as human beings is about relationship to one another. And therefore, that should also be the case with the rest of creation, whether that's where you live and the trees and the rivers and everything where you live, that you should pay respect to them, as well as whatever's in the unseen world, that whatever your that your tradition or whatever you experienced, can sort of think, well, there's obviously, for me, there's something there. I don't know what it is. It might manifest in a particular way like this. So that's how I understand it. And I think just having that feeling of knowing that you're part of an ecosystem is really important. An ecosystem of things that you don't understand and you don't know what they are, including yourself in that.
Right. Although you know them.
Yes. You know them. It's just you don't know what they are.
But you can't articulate them.
Exactly.
They evade your capacity to articulate them in this dimension, the one in which we can articulate things. We can't articulate them because they're projections, if you like, from somewhere else that we do have access to, but which you can't convert into substance and material.
I always like to say, just to round this up, the Daddy Jing, if the Tao that can be named is not the Tao.
Right.
So in other words, as soon as you're trying to name something, it's not the thing really. And I always try to keep that in my head. It's like, okay, I can name it, but it's not the thing. It's the essence of the thing, maybe, but it's not the thing.
Right.
And I would say that is true of a song. So
right. Absolutely, or a great poem.
Yeah.
A great poem is a seed. It's not the whole thing.
Yeah, and even
unfolds,
if you know it, you don't know it. You won't.
An artfully created poem or song that unfolds afresh in the mind and in the experience of the listener. Yeah. And that's so important. It's a living relational thing that happens for you, which is and it resonates with your knowing, which is why it's a great piece of poetry or lyric writing. Anyway.
Brilliant stuff. All right, then, Paul. So don't disappear. Let's say goodbye now. So it looks like I've done some unbelievably brilliant editing. And don't disappear. I'm going to say goodbye properly. All right.
Okay.
But that was excellent. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Vic. Thank you.